Welcome, everybody. A simple question. Who is Dariuss? That's it. Now, that's the question in mind. Now, today, we're talking about the film Dariuss. It is by, a director that I'm really enjoyed watching films from. We talked about The Benefactress. We interviewed Juicy X. And, of course, we're talking about Guerrilla Metropolitana. His films have such a unique style, unique visual and audio aspect. It's just intense. It's insane. But this one, I have to say, I was impressed. Because it can go so many ways, so many different ways, and it's wild. It's wild for that fact. Now, if you haven't watched it, I do recommend watching it. Now, you can do that a few ways. I know Amazon Prime does have it. You can buy it or rent it. I just say, if you want to get it digitally and watch it. But I recommend, honestly, going to the German company Ultravisual Films and ordering, the deluxe edition that comes with all sorts of extras. Also, that short film, Corporate Torment. So, it's worth that, and it won't affect anything because the film has no dialogue, which I thought was very interesting. You're looking at just visuals and audio. That is it. There is no dialogue to get involved with. There is no, none of that. So it's just pure art. It is an art house film. And, I talked to him a lot about this film. After we discussed Benefactress and so forth, I went back and watched this one. And I was just blown away by a lot of it. It has a lot of subliminals, a lot of different images, a lot of different audio clips, sounds. I mean, the audio was very intense on this project. From what I was told, just an intense workload. And there's just, thousands of clips. And everything has its purpose and place and why. But the story, it can be interpreted in many different ways. So again, like I said, who is Dariuss? We don't really know who Dariuss is because of the fact that he's never listed in the credits as all these other people listed, but not Dariuss. And it's just, to me, it brings out that question. It brings up to me, what's a film? What makes a film? What makes a film a film? And this hits all the criteria for that. I'm not saying it's in a film, but this is the kind of unique film that any viewer could watch right now. 3 of us could watch together, 4 of us could watch together, and we will all interpret it, like I said, a different way. Now, the premise is a young girl, daughter, was killed. Family is grieving. They all grieve in different ways. And we kind of just follow that family a little bit. And we start to see that it's very, very disturbing behavior on all, accounts. Because you have, first off, the beginning, you got this beautiful soundtrack. And again, it reminded me of, similar films like Cannibal Holocaust, right, where you have this, brutality on the screen, but beautiful sound to contrast it. That's what Dariuss brings in this. I'm actually a really big fan of the soundtrack. I kind of wish they'd release it separately or put it out there, to purchase. But, yeah, it was very cool because, you got these, like I said, visuals, and the camera's following this girl, and you don't really know where it is going, where it's going to go. But, you can see somebody is watching her. somebody's watching her from afar, somebody's watching her close, kind of, you know, this is, you know, it's that eerie feeling because, you know, we've seen other movies, or if you've seen other movies, you know, if the killer sometimes records their kills, etc. We don't know if that's what we're going to get into, what we're going to see. We never really do see that. We do see a little bit of blood splatter, guts and gore a little bit, kind of, but we never see anything of how, why, where. We don't even know, you know, what happened with the girl. But we figure and we presume she is dead, killed, and then we start to see the family kind of just grieve, and we start to see the family dynamic, and it gets really, like I said, obscene, absurd. You have the father who, you know, you can kind of see he has this almost a love interest with this daughter of his, or an obsession, and he's just kind of grotesque and just repulsive. There's a scene in the car he's eating, and you just can hear just the crunching, and everything's up close. And we don't even know if it's him that's filming his own daughter. We don't even know if it's him that killed his daughter. We don't know anything. And then you have the mother and the grandmother, and then, you know, they have a scene where they have sexual, you know, relations too, and it just becomes this other, just, like I said, weird thing. Now, if you watch the Benefactress, and I was talking, you know, how extreme films, you know, sometimes they contain gore. Again, this, I think, kind of leans away from the gore and more into the sexuality. Again, showing these kind of obscene and absurd circumstances. But it was pure madness on scene, you know, watching it. And I think that's what it also, because you're like, what am I watching? But there's no dialogue. They're not talking. We just got a soundtrack. And you're just kind of like, oh my God, a little bit of a shock factor, because you're not expecting that. But it makes you wonder, you know, were they having, you know, sexual relationships with the young girl as well? And again, this is all up into interpretation. And then we have, you know, a madman enters the scene, and he kills the father, and who's this madman? Because he's, you know, listed as madman, but he's not. Is he Dariuss? I mean, is he? I don't know. You know, I don't know. I don't know. I don't think anybody knows who Dariuss really is, you know. And I think that's the beauty of it. It's up to the viewer. Now, I have one hypothesis on the whole story, and that's basically, you know, this is one way that I seen it. Like, I was like, okay, like, I'm watching it, and I watched this movie multiple times, might I add. You know, it's the kind of film you have to, because every time you pick up something different. Like I said, there's little scenes. Like, there's this one scene in the bushes, and the bush was made to look like a monster, and it's just, you know, there's different techniques that Guerrilla Metropolitana used in this film that is just very unique to his brand of film and his style, and also the flashing words and the subliminals and things. So you go back, you want to freeze frames, you're looking things for half a second. You know, there's things that the brain understands that the eyes can't see. There's like, you know, there's so many things, or the eye sees and the brain can't respond. Like, there's so much going on mentally, visually, audially, that it can drive you probably mad. But in a good way, right? You know, this is, I would say, art house again in one of its purest forms. Because what is art? You know, we show a painting on a wall, and unless, you know, the artist had this definitive story of, hey, this is a man on a boat on July 15th, you know, fishing on this beautiful day. You know, everything is open to interpretation. Why is the man? What is the water? What is it? Is it symbols? Is it symbolism? What's the symbol of? What does it mean? And that's a lot of art. You know, you look at a painting and what does it mean? And other people, it means something to them. And the movies mean everything, you know, different to something. Similar to a song, how it kind of attaches to people and latches on. The same thing will happen with these kind of films, especially this one here. As like I said, you can watch it multiple times, and even in your head, it will change what you've just seen. You know, you'll be like, okay, well, wait a minute now. Maybe it goes like this, you know. But like I said, my first interpretation kind of went that We're watching the film, and the family is a very messed up family. I believe they had maybe 2 children. They didn't want the boy. Boy was sent away somewhere. There's the girl. They're having relations with the girl. Everything's going fine. Something happens with the girl. The father kills the girl. And their son returns, who is Dariuss, which is also the madman, and comes back and takes revenge and kills the father. That was like one of my initial kind of just thoughts on how this whole movie was. I don't know why it went that way. It just kind of did. And I thought to myself, interesting. Because we will never really know. And where there's no dialogue or communication between any characters, we don't hear stories. Our mind has to place these things. Which I like it in a way because you have to physically watch the movie. There's a lot of movies where yes, the visuals are important, this is important, but if you're doing another task, if you're watching something, if you're playing something, if you're doing something, you can kind of just listen to the the conversation of the movie and the vocals and everything and just be like, okay, I get the gist of it. And you kind of understand what's going on. This movie, no. You have to pay attention to it. You have to watch it, like I said, frame by frame almost. With any of his movies, you have to watch frame by frame because there's all so many different details and little Easter eggs and little fun things. But yeah, that's again, it brings, like I said, a lot of joy to me to have to watch these movies because again, we're living in a world where everything is kind of multitask, and this again, you have to focus on this and watch it. And when you do, like I said, your brain just is going to interpret it a certain way. So then you watch it again, and it's going to change and change and change, or maybe it stays the same, but it might not. It definitely won't be the same what the next person has witnessed or viewed or watched. I love to have discussions about this movie because it's very special movie, to me. But I recommend it to anybody watching it, and can watch it. And let me know what you think. Honestly, let me know. Leave me in the comments. Thank you.